soft beams of afternoon sunlight wash over a white clapboard farmhouse, the sort you'd expect in a quiet New England painting. Yet tucked away behind its doors are chapters in Mary Tyler Moore's life that seldom saw the spotlight. From a cozy downtown Minneapolis loft to a stately colonial revival hideaway, each address she cherished was more than just an escape from Hollywood. In this exploration, we journey past the manicured hedges and through the creaking old doors to uncover the hidden stories behind Mary Tyler Moore's iconic homes and the deep sense of self she wove into every corner. Most people remember Mary for her luminous smile, that iconic toss of a tam o' shanter into the Minneapolis sky, and the groundbreaking stories she told on television. Yet behind the scenes, she was also a woman who sought tranquility in brick, stone, and wood, places where she could exhale away from the public's persistent curiosity. From her modest childhood beginnings in Brooklyn, Mary had yearned for a stable sanctuary. Family finances were often shaky. There was always the faint tension of making do, never quite settling down. As her career blossomed, she vowed that her future would include homes that not only offered comfort, but also helped her discover who she truly was outside of the limelight. Each place she inhabited became a reflection of a woman caught between comedic stardom and a quiet yearning to center herself in something real. Her path to iconic fame began with The Dick Van Dyke Show in the early 1960s. The comedic genius and perfect timing that defined her career had fans convinced she was every bit as cheerful off-screen as on. But as soon as she found success, Mary turned her attention to purchasing her first piece of real estate in Los Angeles. A small mid-century modern house perched in the hills of Studio City. By Hollywood standards, it was modest, but she adored the architecture, boxy shapes, clean lines, and floor-to-ceiling windows that let in Los Angeles's radiant sunlight. Designed by an up-and-coming architect who specialized in modern homes, it was rumored the property once belonged to a silent film actress with a penchant for lavish rooftop garden parties. Mary, however, was not the type to host roaring events every weekend. Instead, she reserved her get-togethers for intimate gatherings. She might invite a handful of castmates over for Sunday brunch, setting out coffee and a collection of homemade muffins. Those who got a glimpse of the living room were struck by a sense of understated poise. Wide wood paneling with polished surfaces, potted ferns soaking in the sunlight, and black and white portraits of her family placed discreetly on a side table. That house had one striking feature that told you everything about Mary's approach to living. A narrow veranda overlooking the city just off the master bedroom. She had insisted on installing a built-in bench there, coated in pale cedar to match the deck. In the mornings before a day of rehearsals, Mary would sit on that bench with a mug of tea. Sometimes she read lines, other times she simply gazed at the sprawling city below. It was her pause button, the place she could watch the early haze burn off into the California sun. Co-workers claimed this little routine grounded her, enabling her to slip into her comedic roles with ease. But behind the calm facade, the seeds of restlessness were already growing. She craved something more substantial than a sleek modern box in the hills. Fame was a double-edged sword. The paparazzi's presence was ever looming, and strangers occasionally wandered near her driveway hoping for an autograph. So in the mid-1960s, flush with the success of the Dick Van Dyke Show, Mary sold that Studio City house and embarked on a new adventure. She wanted space, a sense of community, and above all, a property that felt like it was rooted in history. She found it on the East Coast in Westchester County, just north of New York City. The estate was a sprawling colonial revival set behind an alley of towering oak trees. Built in the 1920s, it had a stately white facade, black shutters, and a wide wraparound porch. Stepping through the front door, you'd find warm hardwood floors, a grand staircase with mahogany banisters, and a living room crowned by a brick fireplace that practically begged for gatherings on chilly evenings. Legend had it that an old shipping magnate built the house for his bride, modeling the design on her family's ancestral home in Virginia. Whether or not that was true, the property exuded a gentle romance. But Mary's favorite corner was not in the formal living areas. Down a narrow hallway lay a small library lined with built-in shelves. She had the walls painted in a soft dove gray, hoping to evoke a calm, neutral atmosphere. A tufted armchair sat by the window, along with a reading lamp that cast a mellow glow. This library became her private retreat. Sometimes she'd tuck away there, scribbling in a notepad about her observations of the entertainment industry, her philanthropic ideas, or her grappling with diabetes, a condition she was diagnosed with in her early 30s. It was here, with a well-worn blanket over her legs and a dog curled at her feet, that Mary's reflective side took shape. She confided to a close friend that the library felt like a time capsule of her soul. No cameras, no directors, no comedic lines, just her thoughts and the hush of the country beyond those windows. During the late 60s, Mary's life underwent massive changes. She soared to new heights of stardom, earning multiple awards, and eventually launching The Mary Tyler Moore Show, which redefined what a female lead could be on television. She was recognized everywhere she went. Paparazzi staked out the Westchester Estate's gates, occasionally sending camera flashes through the iron bars at random intervals. In response, Mary invested in tall hedges around the property and doubled the landscaping to create a more secluded environment. She loved to roam the gardens, especially at dusk. The estate boasted a pond near the back of the lot, and she had it dredged and shaped into an oval, so it mirrored the gently curved lines of the property. In the reflection of that still water, Mary sometimes found the clarity she so desperately needed, be it about a career decision or a personal matter. Friends who visited were often invited to walk the property with her. She'd throw on a thick cardigan, lace up boots, and stroll past the orchard, the old stone barn, and eventually circle back to that pond. On the walk, conversations might weave between serious talk, her growing activism for animal rights, and light-hearted banter about the next comedic bit on her show. In these moments, it was clear Mary found in the house an equilibrium between the demands of her public persona and her quieter, more introspective self. But the unstoppable tide of success brought with it new commitments and a yearning for yet another shift. By the early 1970s, filming The Mary Tyler Moore Show kept her anchored in Minneapolis for large chunks of the year. Though the show built sets on a soundstage in California, the real-world establishing shots and certain exterior scenes linked her to the city in the public mind forever. The storyline might have been fictional, but Mary found herself enamored with the spirit of Minnesota, the friendly manner, the lakes, the old neighborhoods with their sturdy architecture. Many fans don't realize she actually purchased a loft-style condo in downtown Minneapolis, deciding it was more than just a fleeting filming location. Nestled in a converted warehouse building dating to the late 19th century, the condo exuded an industrial chic style. Exposed brick walls, tall windows, rough-hewn beams, and open living spaces with polished concrete floors. Mary worked with a local designer to blend the condo's rustic details with her own taste for inviting decor. Soft rugs and plush couches offset the industrial edges. She often joked that living in Minneapolis was like living in the storyline of her own show, minus the comedic misunderstandings. In reality, it offered her a sense of anonymity that she found refreshing. Here, she could slip into a local bookstore, try out new restaurants, even greet neighbors on the elevator without fuss. Sometimes residents of the building would remark on hearing faint jazz music coming from her loft late at night. She was known to enjoy a record or two after dinner, swirling a glass of wine, letting the city lights glimmer through those tall windows. One quirky detail about the Minneapolis loft was an antique sewing machine placed in the corner of the main room. She discovered it at a local thrift market and insisted on displaying it, not for its function, but for its symbolism. She told a friend it reminded her of how life, like fabric, can be stitched and tailored, how one single tear can unravel everything, or one deft seam can create something beautiful. It was a gentle nod to her mother, who had once dreamed of a more refined life and instilled in Mary the belief that reinvention was always possible, whether in one's career or one's personal domain. Amid these growing attachments on both coasts and in the Midwest, Mary found she missed the energy of Manhattan. She'd lived briefly in New York while chasing her earliest dreams of dance and acting, but now she wanted a foothold in the city once more. So in the late 1970s, she and her husband at the time purchased a pre-war apartment on the Upper East Side, not far from Central Park. Built in the 1920s, the building featured a limestone facade, ornate moldings, and a lobby reminiscent of a bygone era, complete with mosaic-tiled floors and a uniformed doorman. Stepping inside the apartment, you were greeted by an elongated gallery hall. At the end of that corridor, the living room opened up like a grand surprise. High ceilings, lavish crown moldings, and tall French windows draped in pale silk curtains. Mary approached this apartment with a sense of restrained elegance. The color palette throughout was soft creams and blues, reflective of her penchant for calm spaces. She disliked heavy ornamentation, so she kept the furniture lines clean but comfortable. A broad, low-slung sofa anchored the living room, accompanied by built-in bookshelves displaying carefully chosen volumes. Everything from comedic scripts she admired to books on spirituality and health. Nestled among the shelves were small sculptures by artists she had befriended over the years, each piece telling a quiet story of the city she loved. Her kitchen, though, was the real gem. Spacious by Manhattan standards, it had been remodeled several times by prior owners. Mary decided to strip it back to something that felt more timeless. She installed white subway tile, open shelving for her dishes and cookware, and a large farm sink that conjured images of simpler times. This was her domain, even if she wasn't a gourmet chef. She liked being able to fix a quick pasta dish, a salad, or simply brew a pot of tea. The kitchen gave her a sense of normalcy in a world that idolized her comedic brilliance. She found something healing in the routine of stirring a sauce or chopping vegetables, tasks that reminded her that, beneath the star power, she was just another person who needed nourishment and a corner of the world to call her own. During this period, Mary experienced intense personal challenges. Her battles with diabetes were ongoing, and she had to manage her health carefully. She also faced heartbreak, including the tragic death of her son Richie in 1980. Those close to her say that, in this devastating time, the Upper East Side apartment became a cocoon of grief and reflection. She spent hours in the small den adjacent to the living room, reading, writing, or simply gazing out the windows at the shifting seasons in Central Park. The city's hustle felt distant up there, separated by the traffic below. Friends who visited noticed that she'd shifted some of her furniture to create a more meditative space. A comfortable armchair by the window, a small table with a lamp, and an unobtrusive piece of art depicting an open field at sunrise. This arrangement seemed to mirror her emotional state, an urge to find light after endless nights of sorrow. By the 1980s, Mary's philanthropic work was in full swing. She became a passionate advocate for diabetes research and animal rights. Many of these events were hosted at her properties, particularly at her Westchester estate, where she could hold fundraisers in the expansive gardens. Even the Minneapolis lofts saw gatherings, though on a smaller scale. Local artists and activists were often welcomed into her open-concept living room, an unlikely meeting of philanthropic minds amid brick walls and city clamor. But it was perhaps the Connecticut farmhouse she acquired in the mid-'80s, her second New England property, that truly captured where she was in this new stage of her life. Tucked away in Litchfield County, this farmhouse was a classic New England gem: white clapboard siding, black shutters, and flower boxes under each window. Unlike the grand colonial revival house in Westchester, this one was decidedly simpler, exuding a homey pastoral charm. It stood on several acres of rolling hills bounded by old stone walls. A weathered red barn and a few outbuildings suggested that once upon a time, this land was indeed a working farm. Mary was drawn to it, not for its scale or grandeur, but for its sense of history. She wanted a place that felt real, a space where she could walk barefoot on the grass and plant her own flowers in the spring. Inside, the ceilings were a bit low, the floors sometimes creaked, and the fireplaces were built of rough-hewn stone. She let the farmhouse's personality guide her design choices. The living room boasted comfortable slip-covered furniture in soft neutrals. Floral prints popped here and there, subtle, not overwhelming. In the kitchen, she displayed mismatched ceramic plates collected from local artisans, each piece telling a small story of craft and care. And then there was that den with the hidden bookcase partially concealed by a tapestry, a quiet nook where Mary would store her private thoughts in those many journals. To an untrained eye, the tapestry might seem decorative, but behind it lay her most intimate conversations with herself. Far from the bright lights of TV studios, Mary immersed herself in the rhythms of farm life. She kept chickens for a time, though, truthfully, she often delegated the daily care to a farmhand, content to scatter feed in the mornings. She loved the authenticity of hearing a rooster crow at dawn. Sometimes she'd pick fresh vegetables from a small garden patch, relishing the feeling of the sun on her shoulders as she lifted tomatoes off the vine. Local folks who occasionally saw her at the feed store or the Sunday farmers market remarked how unassuming she was, a far cry from the polished comedic star who once commanded prime time. She'd chat with them about produce, about the best ways to keep weeds out of the garden, even about local weather patterns affecting the harvest. In a sense, she was building a new identity beyond her iconic screen presence, one grounded in the soil, the air, and the cyclical nature of the seasons. Of course, not all was pastoral perfection. Mary's sense of humor never left her, even amid country living. She told one journalist a delightful anecdote. In her first autumn at the farmhouse, she tried to bake an apple pie using apples from her own orchard. The result was a charred disaster. She laughed about having to open all the windows to clear the smoke and resorting to store-bought pie for her dinner guests. "I can spin comedic gold on television," she quipped, "but apparently I can't spin pastry dough." Beneath the joke lay a simple truth. This was an ordinary woman experiencing life's little mishaps in the sanctuary she had crafted for herself. Throughout her final decades, Mary held on to each of these properties, or at least a version of them, though they shifted in purpose as her life evolved. The Minneapolis loft was eventually sold when the constant travel became unnecessary, but her affection for the city lingered. The Westchester estate likewise changed hands, but only after years of hosting charitable galas and gatherings of friends and collaborators. She seemed to treat the letting go of a house as a poignant farewell to an entire chapter of her life. Yet the farmhouse in Connecticut and the Upper East Side apartment remained her stalwart anchors. Even as her health waned, each site reflected a different side of Mary, the city sophisticate who engaged with the cultural heartbeat of Manhattan, and the earth-bound soul who cherished the hush of rural mornings. Those who had the privilege of visiting both residences were struck by the contrast. The Manhattan apartment was refined and quietly elegant, a cocoon above the ceaseless energy of the streets. The Connecticut farmhouse, by contrast, hummed with nature, with wooden floors that talked back when you walked on them, and screen doors that squeaked as if greeting you every time you entered the kitchen. One was her vantage point on the world's stage, the other a retreat where she could, in many ways, blend into the tapestry of small-town life. In that sense, her homes mirrored the larger trajectory of her career and her personal journey, from vibrant comedic actress shining in the spotlight to a reflective philanthropic figure seeking stillness and meaning behind it all. Over the years, rumors and whispers naturally accumulated around these properties, some true, some likely embroidered by the starstruck. One rumor insisted there was a secret corridor in the Westchester house that Mary used for quick escapes from the paparazzi. Another rumor claimed that an old caretaker on her Connecticut farm believed the barn was haunted by a previous owner from the 1800s. Mary took these stories in stride, sometimes playfully encouraging them. If a local reporter asked about ghosts, she'd grin and say, "If they're here, I hope they don't mind my singing in the shower." In truth, she never seemed bothered by the idea that her homes had a life of their own, full of secrets whispered through old timbers. Occasionally, Mary would share a personal insight about why home mattered so deeply to her. During an interview for a local paper, she reflected on how her comedic persona often overshadowed her private battles. You can make the whole world laugh and still come home to a lonely house if you're not careful. Perhaps that explained her penchant for layering warmth and personal touches into every corner, ensuring she was never truly alone in those spaces. Whether it was a stack of diaries, a beloved antique sewing machine, or a kitchen table brimming with local produce, she surrounded herself with tokens of genuine life, as though weaving her emotional tapestry directly into the walls. By the time Mary approached her later years, her health challenges grew more pressing. The Connecticut farmhouse became an even more sacred place of solace. She'd spend long afternoons curled up in that tapestry-hidden den, writing in her journals or reading letters from fans who credited her for inspiring them, particularly women who saw in her a symbol of independence and resilience. Sometimes, a caretaker or close friend would find her napping in the armchair, a cat dozing on her lap, the fireplace crackling softly, and a half-finished note laid across her blanket. She might occasionally slip into memories of the past, of that first modern house in Los Angeles, the laughter in Westchester, the crisp lines of her Minneapolis loft. Each property was a chapter, each chapter its own emotional anchor. The final transformations and farewells to these homes happened quietly. As Mary's life wound down, she maintained a dignified privacy. The farmhouse remained her primary residence, with the Manhattan apartment still kept but visited less frequently. She passed away in 2017, leaving behind not just an entertainment legacy, but also a series of dwellings that told her story far more intimately than a camera lens ever could. In the aftermath, those close to her shared fleeting glimpses of what she left behind. Personal letters lovingly stored in drawers, photo albums chronicling life at each residence, and, of course, those journals behind the tapestry, revealing the swirling emotional depths of a woman revered for her comedic brilliance. And so, as we imagine each property now, whether it's been sold, renovated, or preserved in some form, we can still picture Mary Tyler Moore's spirit in every doorway and window frame. She was the actress who turned the world on with her smile, yet found her truest comfort off-screen, away from the applause. Perhaps the real magic was how she infused every beam and brick with the fullness of her life, the joys and triumphs, the heartbreaks and second chances. Each home was more than real estate. It was a testament to the remarkable truth that even legends need places to hide, to grow, to laugh in private, and to nurse their wounds. In the end, her houses stand as a collective diary, preserving the memory of a woman who navigated the complexities of fame with grace and humility, like the private line she once wrote in her journal. If only walls could speak, maybe I wouldn't feel I have to tell them everything myself. These walls indeed spoke volumes. They whispered of a star finding refuge in candlelit libraries, farm kitchen aromas, Manhattan sunsets, and Minnesotan cityscapes. They told the story of Mary Tyler Moore, an American icon who built dwellings as layered and heartfelt as the roles she brought to life on screen. In those windows lit by soft golden lamps, we see not just the comedic genius, but a woman who claimed her right to peace, reflection, and the deep resonance of home. And that wraps up today's video. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like, leave a comment with your feedback, and subscribe to stay updated on upcoming videos. Appreciate you watching.